Sorry.
Welcome to another episode of Sounds Reasonable. I'm your host, Dr. Brad, and I am joined in the production of our weekly show by Tim and Tracy. We're all members of the Free Thought community, and our Sounds Reasonable website can be found on Facebook. Do you experience frequent irrational thoughts? A pervasive belief in a divine Skydaddy? An insatiable urge to read horoscopes, perform spells, speak in tongues, or pray? Fortunately, you are now listening to the cure for these ailments. Sounds Reasonable. This show is dedicated to bringing you, the listener, the latest news in free thought, science, logic and reason, and politics and religion. And of course, we encourage you to share your thoughts with us after each episode by posting comments and asking questions on our Facebook page. What is free thought? What does it mean to be a free thinker? The dictionary definition is a person who forms opinions about religion based on reason, independent of tradition, authority, or established belief. Here's Christopher Hitchens' working definition. Our belief is not a belief. Our principles are not a faith. We do not rely solely upon science and reason because these are necessary rather than sufficient factors, but we distrust anything that contradicts science or outrages reason. We may differ on many things, but what we respect is free inquiry, open-mindedness, and the pursuit of ideas for their own sake. We'll now move on to our science news segment, and remember that the scientific mind is one that allows its perceptions of reality to be constrained by good evidence and good argument. We have two science news stories this week, both concerned with the coronavirus COVID-2 pandemic. The first looks at promising results from a candidate vaccine. The second examines a treatment that has the potential to alleviate the symptoms produced from a COVID-2 infection. The vaccine article that I'm going to relay is from the Associated Press, published on July 14th of this year, authored by Laura Neergaard, entitled, First COVID-19 Vaccine Tested in U.S. Poised for Final Testing. The actual research article appears in the July 14th issue of the New England Journal of Medicine. The first COVID-19 vaccine tested in the U.S. Revved up people's immune systems just the way scientists had hoped, researchers reported Tuesday, as the shots are poised to begin key final testing. No matter how you slice this is good news, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the U.S. government's top infectious disease expert, told the Associated Press. The experimental vaccine developed by Fauci's colleagues at the National Institutes of Health and Moderna Incorporated will start its most important step around July 27th. A 30,000 person study to prove if the shots really are strong enough to protect against the coronavirus. And of course, that's the bottom line for any vaccine, right? So let's all keep our fingers crossed that things keep moving correctly. Exactly. But Tuesday, researchers reported anxiously awaited findings from the first 45 volunteers who rolled up their sleeves back in March. Sure enough, the vaccine provided a hope for immune boost. Now, by those first 45 volunteers, I'm kind of reminded of the initial testing of the polio virus vaccine back in the 50s. Those individuals were called polio pioneers. I don't know if you'd ever heard that before or not, but a little interesting historical tidbit. And they'd get these big cardboard badges when the grade school kids, after they'd had their initial vaccine, saying, "I'm a polio pioneer." So rather cool. Now, those early volunteers developed what are called neutralizing antibodies in their bloodstream. These molecules are key to blocking infection. And at levels compared to those found in people who survived COVID-19, the research team reported in the New England Journal of Medicine. This is an essential building block that is needed to move forward with the trials that could actually determine whether the vaccine does protect against infection, said Dr. Lisa Jackson of the Kaiser Permanente Washington Research Institute in Seattle, who led the study. There's no guarantee, but the government hopes to have results around the end of the year, record-setting speed for developing a vaccine. Again, this cannot be overlooked. That we are truly proceeding at record speed. Normally, a vaccine would take anywhere from 7 to 10 years, and we're only about 7 months into this thing, and we're obviously flying right along. Now, the vaccine requires 2 doses spaced a month apart, and we'll explain why that is, why we need that month here in just a little bit. Now, there were no serious side effects, but more than half the study participants reported flu-like reactions to the shots that aren't uncommon with other vaccines, such as fatigue, headache, chills, fever, and pain at the injection site. For 3 participants given the highest dose, those reactions were more severe. That dose isn't being pursued. Now, some of those reactions are similar to coronavirus symptoms, but they're temporary, lasting about a day, and they occur right after vaccination, the researchers noted. Now, this is a small price to pay for protection against COVID, said Dr. William Schaffner of Vanderbilt University Medical Center, a vaccine expert who wasn't involved with the study. He called the results a good first step and is optimistic that final testing could deliver answers about whether it's really safe and effective by the beginning of next year. It would be wonderful, but that assumes everything's working right on schedule, Schaffner cautioned. Now, Moderna's share price jumped nearly 15% in trading after U.S. markets closed. Shares of the company based in Cambridge, Mass. Have nearly quadrupled this year. And I keep kicking myself. I just noticed that they're now trading almost at $100 a share. I had a chance to buy them at $30 and didn't do it.
Oh,
no. So shame on me. But anyway. It would be, let's see. Now, Tuesday's results only included younger adults. The first step testing later was expanded to include dozens of older adults, the age group most at risk from COVID-19. Those results aren't public yet, but regulators are evaluating them. Fauci said final testing will include older adults as well as people with chronic health conditions that make them more vulnerable to the virus, and Black and Latino populations likewise affected. Nearly 24 possible COVID-19 vaccines are in various stages of testing around the world. Candidates from China and Britain's Oxford University also are entering final testing stages. The 30,000 person study will mark the world's largest study of a potential COVID-19 vaccine so far. And the NIH developed shot isn't the only one set for such massive US testing, crucial to spot rare side effects. The government plans similar large studies of the Oxford candidate and another by Johnson & Johnson separately. And Pfizer Incorporated is planning its own huge study. Already, people can start signing up to volunteer for the different studies. People think this is a race for one winner. Me, I'm cheering every one of them on, said Fauci, who directs NIH's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. We need multiple vaccines. We need vaccines for the world, not only for our own country. Hear that, Mr. Trump? Around the world, governments are investing in stockpiles of hundreds of millions of doses of the different candidates in hopes of speedily starting inoculations if any are proven to work. So Tim, if I could have that first figure, we'll describe how the leading candidate vaccine works. Oh, wrong figure. There we go. Okay, so the major difference between this vaccine and previous ones is that the vaccine itself is composed of RNA. Now, RNA acts as a message to produce proteins. And the key molecule or molecules that you must mount an immune response against to be protected against viruses are protein components of the virus. Now, there's one key protein in particular with COVID-19 that you must generate antibodies against. It's called the S protein for the surface protein. And so the RNA that is being used in this vaccine will code for that S protein of the virus. And so that's what's being described as the antigen here. Okay, so you receive the RNA enters a cell, the cell translates that RNA to the S protein or antigen, and subsequently you have an immune response mounted against it by your immune cells. Now, some of those cells will become what we describe as memory cells. And what that means is that when you subsequently get exposed to the real pathogen, those memory cells will recognize the same antigen that is present on the actual virus particle itself. This results in a very rapid and strong response against the virus and subsequently provides protection from it. Okay, so that's the basics behind how Moderna's RNA-based vaccine works. And this is an extremely safe route to go. Okay, note that you're not exposed to the virus at all in the production of immunity via this vaccine. Okay, guys, what do you think? Are we on the right track here? I can't hear you, Tim.
That's because I was muted for some.
There we go.
Yes, that's
Go ahead.
Fantastic. And again, as we talked about those potential for using those RNA subunit vaccines, and I think this is great news. Great news. Will those will that also activate those B cells that can present antigen, or is it only going to be those that mediate through the helper T cells?
Right. So it's it's rather rare that you have non-repetitious, and I'm kind of getting technical here, but it's rather rare that you have non-repetitious proteins that are capable of directly activating B cells.
Right.
So what's going to happen here is that the initial protein that's made by the RNA in the vaccine will activate helper T cells, and those helper T cells will then assist the production of antibodies by the B cells.
Okay. What they call a T-dependent.
Correct. So yeah. So this is clearly a T-dependent antigen, and I guess the thing I forgot to do, I'll do it now. So why do we have a separation of 1 month between the two shots? The reason is so that we generate those memory cells. It takes about a month, okay, for those memory cells to be produced in high enough numbers to be effective. So after those are produced, then not only do we boost the B cells that will produce antibodies against the virus, but we also boost the number of memory cells. Okay, so that we produce a very vigorous immune response by having that time in between the first and second injections.
Super. Yeah,
Sounds good to me.
Great news. Great news.
Okay, so the second story I'm going to relate deals with a treatment that prevents the immunopathology of COVID-2 infection. And this article appeared in Medicine in Drug Discovery and was an editorial piece put together by the editors of the journal. It was published on May 11th of 2020 and is titled Melatonin Inhibits COVID-19 Induced Cytokine Storm by Reversing Aerobic Glycolysis in Immune Cells, a Mechanistic Analysis. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of scientific jargon to our audience, so let's go through the article, and I've got the figure illustrated here that in essence goes with this article. Now, the pathogenesis of COVID-19 respiratory infection in a major way is related to what is referred to as the cytokine storm. And the cytokine storm syndrome, or CSS, is a hyperinflammatory response. During this response, we get an explosive production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, such as tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin-1 beta, and others occur, greatly exaggerating the generation of molecule-damaging reactive oxygen species, or free radicals. And that's the key thing that is going to be dealt with the treatment that we're going to describe here. Now, in severe cases, the cytokine storm is responsible for the most obvious signs of COVID-19 infection, including fever, lung injury, which causes cough and shortness of breath, and the long-term complication of lung fibrosis, and in the most severe cases, of course, death. Now, a causative factor related to the hyperinflammatory state of immune cells is their ability to dramatically change their metabolism. Now, similar to cancer cells and many solid tumors, immune cells such as macrophages or monocytes under inflammatory conditions abandon mitochondrial oxidative phosphorylation for ATP production in favor of cytosolic aerobic glycolysis. This is also known as the Warburg factor. So the figure you're looking at on the right-hand side is the healthy macrophage. Okay, and note that we're actively producing melatonin all the way down at the bottom. Okay, and it's in capital letters, meaning that we're producing a lot of it. And that's what we do in the normal situation. That melatonin is what protects us from free radicals that cause tissue damage. On the right-hand side, we have a COVID-19 activated macrophage. And just above the little ovals you're looking at are mitochondria that are found in the cell. Those, again, are the powerhouses of the cell, you can think of them as. But you'll note that COVID-19 induces that cytokine storm. Okay, so right there. And that cytokine storm ends up causing inhibition of the production of melatonin. Okay, so it inhibits a key enzyme known as PDC. And without that enzyme, we dramatically cut down our production of melatonin. And as a result, we're now susceptible to tissue damage, okay, by those free radicals that would normally be soaked up, shall we say, by the melatonin. Now, a number of drugs have been proposed as treatments to prevent or reduce the severity of a COVID-19 infection. One agent that has been suggested to be potentially useful in this regard is the endogenously synthesized molecule melatonin. Now, melatonin was initially discovered in and thought to be exclusively a product of the vertebrate pineal gland. However, in consideration of the identification of melatonin in prokaryotic bacteria, from which mitochondria evolved, and this is the so-called endosymbiotic theory, and the uncommonly high levels of saleable melatonin in mitochondria, it was speculated and eventually documented that this indoleamine is synthesized in this organelle. Now, given that most cells, there are a few exceptions, contain mitochondria, it is now believed that melatonin production occurs in most cells in all organisms. This has been specifically demonstrated in human lung monocyte macrophages. And of course, this is where we have the main issues with a COVID-19 infection, the lung tissue. Now, in healthy cells, including macrophages, melatonin synthesis in mitochondria is maintained by the entrance of pyruvate, which is a glucose metabolite, into the mitochondria, where it is metabolized to acetyl coenzyme A by the enzyme PDC. Now, acetyl-CoA feeds the citric acid cycle and supports ATP synthesis. But it is also a required cofactor substrate for the rate-limiting enzyme in melatonin synthesis. And that's that AANAT down there near the bottom left. Thus, when the mitochondria adopt aerobic glycolysis, pyruvate in mitochondria is no longer converted to acetyl-CoA because PDC is inhibited by the enzyme pyruvate dehydrogenase kinase, or PDK. Therefore, as a consequence of COVID-19 infection, the macrophage mitochondria cannot synthesize melatonin. Now, because of melatonin's potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activities, it would normally reduce the highly pro-inflammatory cytokine storm and neutralize the generated free radicals, thereby preserving cellular integrity and preventing lung damage. In the absence of acetyl-CoA, mitochondrial melatonin is no longer available to combat the inflammatory response or to neutralize the generated reactive oxygen species and the massive damage that occurs in the respiratory tree, resulting in the primary signs of COVID-19 disease. Importantly, endogenous melatonin production diminishes markedly with age, especially in frail older individuals. And of course, if you think about who are the most susceptible to COVID-19 induced disease, it's that age group, right? Okay, so So again, this makes perfect sense with what we're observing with the metabolism, the altered metabolism in healthy versus infected individuals. Now, aerobic glycolysis is an important feature of highly pro-inflammatory state, since it ensures the necessary high levels of ATP and the abundant supply of biomolecules to ensure synthesis and release of the damaging molecules that constitute the cytokine storm. This increased aerobic glycolysis, coupled with the absence of locally produced melatonin, provides the optimal environment, that is, the perfect, shall we say, cytokine storm, for the massive tissue damage that occurs in COVID-19 disease. Now, given the above information, the use of supplemental melatonin as a treatment to overcome a COVID-19 infection is justified. Exogenously administered melatonin, that is something that you're either going to ingest orally or otherwise, reverses aerobic glycolysis by repressing both HIF-1 alpha and mTOR. So again, those are in the upper right by the cytokine storm. Okay, so we end up inhibiting those molecules. And in so doing, PDK is not turned on, and as a result, PDC remains on. Okay. Now, the functionally reinstated mitochondria generated melatonin in combination with the parenteral melatonin provides a formidable weapon to reduce the cytokine storm, as well as its damaging consequences, thereby relieving the signs of COVID-19 infection. The anti-inflammatory and antioxidant actions of melatonin in protecting the lungs from damage in many experimental models that involve inflammation or oxidative stress, or both, is very well documented. Moreover, melatonin has antiviral actions against viruses other than COVID-19. So the collective data, in addition to its very high safety profile, indicate that melatonin would be effective as a treatment for COVID-19 and support the recommendation of the published reports that encourage its use for this purpose. And this is absolutely beautiful. Melatonin is inexpensive, non-toxic over a very wide dose range, has a long shelf life, and can be self-administered, which is a major advantage when large numbers of individuals are involved. Thus, the use of melatonin to mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic would be feasible and a socially responsible measure to attempt.
I already take it to sleep.
Right, exactly. A lot, and that's just it.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of direct evidence out there that this is a perfectly safe drug, unlike hydroxychloroquine.
Right.
Oh, I take that too for arthritis, though.
A little chlorine water.
I was very excited when I saw this article, and Tim, I think you brought it to my attention,
Right.
as I recall.
Right,
So,
I ran across that.
yeah, so that thanks so much for doing that. I mean, that is awesome.
Thought it was amazing.
And, the only thing lacking, I think, is some people jumping on board here. I wish I tried to find some information on that, but there really isn't much. So I'm not sure why there isn't more interest in it. Excuse me, than there is. But anyway, let's hope it catches on.
Yeah, it catches the wind and blossoms. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, again, well, no, nope, I don't want to answer that. I answered it. It was not going to. I answered my own question, so it's
all right. Good enough.
and I was going to be. It wasn't going to be. It was going to be a wrong question. So.
Tracy, any last comments?
Not that I can think of. Like I said, I use melatonin to sleep, and I've given it to my kids too, so I know it's pretty safe.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's in routine use, and you can just get it over the counter, right? You don't.
Oh,
You
yeah.
have a. Yeah. You don't need a prescription or anything, correct?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you have it. So you know, if you think you're getting COVID, go get some.
Oh, there was one. Did it mention? Obviously, then that has some effect on the amount of ATP production or not? Did you, or is it? But probably not.
Well, let's see now.
Because
I have to remember my cell biology, but as I recall, aerobic glycolysis is more efficient than anaerobic, right?
right,
And
right,
so,
right.
so you'd expect to get more ATPs from aerobic glycolysis, which
Right.
makes sense, because those macrophages will be more active, in a higher immune state, if you will,
Hmm.
when they're producing lots of ATP as opposed to lower amounts.
Right. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. So we will be right back with more Sounds Reasonable after this short break.
But how can I hide you without an alibi? It's a reckless fight without an alibi. You took my innocence. I can't wait no longer. I'm playing with the monsters. Everything that brought me alive. But we're all like monsters, playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a reckless fight without an alibi. You took my innocence without an alibi. You took my innocence without an alibi.
And we're back with more Sounds Reasonable on July 19th, 2020. Donald Trump is unashamedly involved in cronyism. Shocker. There can be no doubt about this. His policies have been purposely designed to erode labor unions and skirt regulations to help his buddies rake in even bigger profits. Tracy has an alarming story concerning some of his latest exploits. So Tracy, fill us in.
Yes, there's a reporter, Jane Mayer, who did an in-depth piece for the New Yorker, and there have been, it's an hour-long read audibly, and I've read it numerous times and I've listened to it, and it is very interesting. It's about a man, Ron Cameron. He's a large tycoon. He's a poultry plant owner, or his company, Mountaire, that's actually based out of Little Rock, but has a lot of poultry plants in the Delaware area. He has donated nearly $3 million to the Trump campaign. He's been appointed to the Pandemic Economic Impact Advisory Board by Donald Trump. And in April, Tyson ran a full-page ad in a number of newspapers, basically saying that there was going to be a food shortage, that there was going to be a shortage of meat, which was not true. We can go online and we can see the the trend in meat that's going overseas. And apparently there has been more meat going overseas to countries like China and other countries. So there was never going to be a meat shortage. But anyway, Donald Trump took this opportunity 2 days later after the Tyson ads ran to deem poultry plant employees and other meat packing employees as essential. And once they did this, the poultry plants clammed up. They no longer had to report employees who had the number of employees who tested positive for COVID, basically.
Yeah.
And Jane Meyer basically interviewed employees, not inside the plant, of course, but outside the plant. A lot of them were had to be anonymous or whatever, but employees began disappearing from inside the plant. Anyway, it was kind of obvious that a lot of them were getting COVID, and basically, let's see here. Oh, and this story I just wanted to say came out July 13th, and there have been a lot of, like, NPR did a story on the story, and numerous publications did a story on this story, so it's kind of a big deal. Let's see. It was about 1/3 of employees in the poultry business are protected by a union, which isn't really that many anyway. That's basically the only protection that these employees have still. And now, let's see, there's kind of an attack on the union. Basically, the employees that are disappearing are being replaced by employees through a temp agency. Anyway, they're trying to kind of limit the protection that the union is giving them. Only about 1/3 of poultry workers are represented by organized labor, and those who are unionized face mounting pressure. The industry, which is dominated by corporations such as Monterre, which I said was Ron Cameron's company, has increasingly concentrated, expanding its political influence while replacing unionized employees with contract hires, often immigrants or refugees. Those vulnerable workers are technically hired by temp agencies, relieving poultry plants of accountability if documentation is lacking. Trump has weakened oversight of the industry while accepting millions of dollars in political donations from some of its most powerful figures, including Ronald Cameron, Monterre's reclusive owner. In 2016, Cameron gave nearly $3 million to organizations supporting Trump's candidacy, which I mentioned already. And okay, so suddenly one person at the Shelbyville plant in Sussex County, Delaware, his name is Oscar Cruz Sosa. He only speaks Spanish. He raised a legal objection to the contract with the union, arguing that he had been forced to join the union and pay dues against his will. So suddenly there's one person suing the union, which could catastrophically cut the union out completely. And he has all these attorneys. He won't talk to the press. He won't talk to anyone. The union reached out to him, and his attorney said, nope, that's harassment. So no one can get to him. And they're saying this is kind of obviously that he's being coached by someone. His case was supported by lawyers from the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, the foremost anti-union advocacy group, which is funded by undisclosed tax-deductible donations. Meanwhile, a mysterious group calling itself the Oscar Cruz Committee for Employee Rights sent out mailings in English supporting Cruz Sosa's complaint. He only speaks Spanish. The return address was the Rehoboth Beach branch of Malibiz, which rents post office boxes. Jonathan Williams, a spokesperson for the union, suspects that Cruz Sosa was a stalking horse. It's not hard to find one individual who may get special privileges from management and who maybe is offered a future position. It's very, very rare, though, when an employee does the research, contacts the Department of Labor, and goes through all this effort. Usually someone is being coached. Anyway, let's see. It's a really long story, so I'm trying to give you the gist of it.
Yeah, so that, let me just jump in here, Tracy.
Yeah, please.
Did you get any feel from the article as to how this may affect the future of the poultry quality that ultimately reaches the consumer?
Well, actually, what's going on is, since Donald Trump stepped in and said these are essential workers, there's more of a deregulation now. As far as it being essential, now the poultry plants are more deregulated, which means since they're afraid there's not going to be any meat, they're saying, okay, now you can produce more chickens, which means the employees have to be closer together and they can produce more chickens than they were before, which makes it more dangerous, which means they're closer together and there's kind of more of a COVID risk. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that and, poultry, of course, is highly susceptible to contamination by salmonella, for example. And certainly there have been other instances of other diarrheal causing disease agents that have contaminated chicken from time to time. So one might anticipate that the harder you push these individuals, the more crowded you make them, the more likely we're going to have outbreaks from contaminated chicken, disease outbreaks from contaminated chicken. It was Sinclair Lewis, right, that wrote the book The Jungle, that exposed the horrors of the meat production industry back in the 1920s, I believe, if I recall my dates correctly. So are we headed for another bout of dealing with the jungle, shall we say?
Right. And the first door to that has been, again, the weakening of the unions, to where, if only a third, that are of the employees in those in packing industry, if it's down to only a third, that just weakens, again, the ability of the union to protect not just the employee rights, but also, in conjunction with government inspection and those types of things, ensuring a safe working environment and so on. So, and then you can also look at, if they're increasing the packing plant ability to process, then they're going to be looking at what are they going to do with the growers. So increasing, that they deregulate some of the growers, and again, back to the disease situation that Dr. Brad mentioned.
Yeah, with Trump doing what he did, the governmental agencies that are regulating the chicken industry and also the safety and all of that, the government agencies are more inclined to side with the poultry industry companies rather than the employees, you know.
And I thought it was, again, interesting with the use of temps, because there's all kinds of things there they don't, they don't have to worry, like you mentioned, with documentation. And that's always been, if they really wanted to stop that problem with undocumented workers, they needed to find companies, punish the companies for hiring, not the individuals. And you would have a big stop with that. But again, those are, in my hometown, a beef processing plant and a turkey processing plant at one time, still did the beef plant there. But there are you're limited on the number of people that will work those plants.
Right.
The Latinos and those, you have those that will come and work gladly work the plants. They'll make more money. They'll send money home. Anyway, so there'll be a labor shortage potential there with that. So.
Right, and then the union will just sort of fizzle out, and then the employees won't have any protection.
Yeah, you see abuses like this, right from day one, when Trump got in there, and this, I'm sure I wasn't the only one that saw this coming. Once he got there, but what amazes me the most, perhaps, is the absolute hypocrisy here as well. So isn't it amazing that everyone is anti-immigrant on the Republican side, except, of course, when it helps out the millionaires and billionaires that depend on the labor of those individuals. Then suddenly we're able to look the other way and say, oh, you mean what? We've got illegals in our plant? I don't believe it.
Exactly.
So that type of hypocrisy just drives me insane. I just absolutely go bonkers over that.
This is what they're doing right now and actually it was just a couple days ago. Okay, well, let me start here. I'm going to read the part of the article about the election they're having with the union situation. After Cruz Sosa, which is the guy has the problem with the union supposedly, after Cruz Sosa got 30% of his coworkers to sign a petition, the National Labor Relations Board ordered an election at the Selbyville plant, which is the plant in Delaware. When the union protested that this would violate the customary bar on overturning contracts, the union contracts, before 3 years, the NLRB decided to broaden the case, re-examining the entire concept of barring challenges to settled union contracts. The move has shocked labor law expert. By statute, the NLRB has 5 members and is bipartisan, but the Trump administration has filled only 3 seats, all with Republicans. Given the pandemic, the union argued that there was no way an in-person election could be safely and fairly held in Sussex County in Delaware, where Selbyville is situated. Delaware governor has declared a state of emergency on March 23rd because of the surge in COVID cases, almost half of them in Sussex County, which has many poultry plants. The union asked for a stay, but on June 24th, the agency moved to proceed with the election by mail. The ballots were sent out and must be received by July 14th, which is just a couple of days ago, so we can follow up with this. Meanwhile, the board will weigh the larger question of whether such elections are legal, potentially overturning a precedent that dates back to the New Deal. So that's something we can follow up on to see how that election went through the mail.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely keep track of this story.
Sure.
Well, I think we're going to have to leave it there.
Okay.
But, thanks so very much, Tracy, for putting that together. And that was That was a lot of material, and I
Very
appreciate
interesting.
your efforts putting that together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Sure
we'll
thing.
be right back with more Sounds Reasonable after a short break.
Messing with my head again. You had your heart set on me, but these feels, they come and go, and they come so easily. Tell me what it is about you that I can't forget, but you're breaking down my walls again just to set me free. Why do I, baby, why do I love the way you always leave me? Why do I, baby, why do I love the touch but never love the feeling? Why do I, baby, why do I love the way you always leave me? Why do I, baby, why do I love the touch but never love the feeling?
And we're back with our politics and religion segment here on Sounds Reasonable. When it comes to the separation of church and state, perhaps the biggest no-no is using taxpayer funds to pay for various religious forums and activities. The Trump administration has used the COVID-19 pandemic as cover to do just that. Tim has put together a story for us on this issue. So Tim, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Brad. So my story today, or my segment today, is actually coming from a podcast, The Young Turks. I don't know how many are familiar or follow The Young Turks. If you don't, you need to look into them. They're excellent group. And their podcast is based on an Associated Press investigation. And so the Catholic Church brought in billions of dollars of COVID-19 stimulus money as a religious institution that doesn't even pay taxes. A religious organization, as a religious organization, they're not qualified to get this stimulus money, but they lobbied the Trump administration for an exemption under the small business loan part of the stimulus bill. Okay, now did you catch that? The small business loan component of the stimulus bill and the small business of the Catholic Church.
Did you say it was a small business loan?
Small business, yes, small business
okay.
loan. So that's just one problem. And again, the amount that the Catholic Church collected, the tax-exempt Catholic Church, remember, which has the amount they collected was between 1.4 and 3.5 billion dollars. No, you heard me right, not million. I said $1 billion with a big B.
Billion?
Billions of dollars.
Billion.
Yeah, so an organization, yeah.
Last time I checked, the definition of a small business was $4 million or less.
Well, I'm going to get into as far as what they reported as far as that. It's probably, anyway, we'll get to that here in just a second. So an organization of Catholic financial office called the Diocesan Fiscal Management Office reported that about 9,000 Catholic entities received loans. So the Catholic Church, again, in case you missed it, a tax-exempt organization, was allowed to receive taxpayer money. Let's look at just some small cases. For example, the New York Archdiocese received 15 loans worth at least they had at least 15, they may have had more, but they had 15 loans worth of at least $15 million just for its top executive officers. Okay. Executive officers, yeah. The St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue received at least $1 million. So just that church received $1 million. A loan of at least $2 million went to the diocese covering the Wheeling, Charleston, West Virginia. And then I don't know if you've caught this, but that church had an investigation. There was an investigation of that church within the diocese, and it revealed that then Bishop Michael Bransfield embezzled funds and liked chasing after the young priest. Now, I don't know if these two actions are necessarily connected. I think chasing young priests was just his hobby.
It takes money to chase young priests.
Yeah, it does. A lot of
You gotta
whining,
buy all the gifts,
a lot of whining and dining.
Exactly. Huh?
all the grooming materials, brushes, and
Yes. A lot of
hairspray.
a lot
Pointy
of
hat.
late night Bible study. So overall, the government approved almost
Bible study.
the government approved almost 500 loans of $1 million or more to Catholic entities. The sad thing is there are 12 million legitimate businesses that qualify for stimulus checks who haven't received them. And here we have the Trump administration giving small businesses small business loans to the small business Catholic Church, of course. And did I
We're
mention?
only eating 1 meal a day over here. I don't understand.
Yeah, and in case you missed it, remember I did mention they don't pay taxes, right? And they're not a small business, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, so the rule that they were able to get an exemption on is called the affliction rule. This rule has to do with small business loans. If you have more than 500 employees, you do not qualify for these small business loans. And I think they meant for these pandemic loans, stimulus loans. Again, did you catch that? Less than 500 or fewer employees to receive loans. Plus, religious organizations do not qualify for government loans. So the Catholic Church had to be given 2 exemptions to receive billions of dollars in loans. Yes, billions of dollars. So Dr. Brad, you're probably asking yourself, how in the hell did they get these loans?
That's exactly what I was asking.
Yeah.
I also want to know.
Okay. Well, that's an excellent question. And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering. Well, they lobbied for it. According to the research done by the Associated Press, the Catholic Church spent about $50,000 to lobby politicians. And it looks like that $50,000 investment yielded between $1.4 and $3.5 billion. So to quote the Young Turks, bribery in America is the best investment you can make.
Boy, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and I guess the Catholic Church was seeing corporations raking in the government money, and they decided, why shouldn't we be doing the same thing? And now there are other nonprofits that were also obtaining these small business loans, and some probably shouldn't be. And for example, the Americans for Tax Reform, who fight to lower taxes for billionaires, received some of these stimulus loans.
Oh,
And
wow.
in my opinion, and I'm sure in others, they should not be getting these loans.
If this is true, this is disgusting.
It's horrible. Now, of course, many will not see a problem with giving loans to the Christian religions, Christian religious institutions, just because of the fact there's many they do quite a bit for the poor, and of course, the Catholic churches it does have the programs. But where do we stop blurring the line between the separation of church and state? And this sets a precedent for any religious institution to receive these loans. And I'm sure there are quite a few people who don't mind the money going to Christians, but what if they would start raising holy hell if it went to a mosque or to even a synagogue.
I want the Satanists to apply for some.
Well, there you go. Yeah, let's jump in.
No kidding.
And here's another disturbing fact here, or another disturbing thing they uncovered is keep in mind that the majority of these loans were approved within the first 2 weeks, and by the end of that first 2 weeks, the money for small business loans ran out. So not only did the Catholic Church get these loans, but it appears they were at the front of the line to receive the loans. And can you imagine how many legitimate mom and pop small businesses missed out on loans that they needed to stay afloat just so Trump could buy votes from the Catholic Church? So it appears he was buttering up the Catholic Church a little bit for votes. So to me, it's a clear violation of separation of church and state. Should not have happened. And it also sheds light on the endemic problem of greed and corruption within the administration and probably with many members of Congress that can be lobbied to approve these things and give these exemptions to, in this case, the Catholic Church and some other organizations that shouldn't be receiving this money. So
Yeah, just incredible. Just makes your stomach turn. I don't know what else to say about it, other than 100% predictable with this particular administration. Why we should expect anything different, I guess I don't know. Especially with our do nothing Congress that just lets him do it.
Right.
It just has yielded all authority to Trump. Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that again, they're as much fault as well because they have the capability of putting a stop to a lot of this, and they just look the other way, or actually enable it. They're enablers.
Yeah,
They
absolutely. I consider them enablers.
Yeah,
I agree with you, Jim. They're enablers.
What's next?
Is there anything left?
I mean, that's a precedent.
4
They're
months.
making they're
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I
Uh,
guess
Once they set a precedent,
unless they add more to that small business loan, at least it sounded like that money is out, unless they've expanded that.
yeah, I mean we're at the brink because I believe it's the end of this month that all of those stimulus checks end.
Mm-hmm.
And so unless the HEROES Act gets passed, they're doomed.
Right.
It's done, and we're going to see those unemployment numbers just skyrocket.
Again, yeah.
and
And again, it's loans, but the whole fact is you have those loans going to some place that shouldn't be getting them, and you have the mom and pop, the small businesses that actually need it, not able to get those loans.
Yeah.
the unemployment situation that ends at the end of this month is actually going to be worse, I think, than most people think, because if you became regularly unemployed and you get regular unemployment, that's going to end at the end of this month too, along with the PUA. All of the $600 a month stuff is going to end at the end of this month. The people who are getting pandemic unemployment assistance and the people who are getting regular unemployment. It's not just the people who are getting pandemic unemployment assistance.
Yeah.
It's all of it.
Anybody
Regular
apply,
unemployment
right.
and PUA, all of that is ending at the end of this month. All of it.
Yeah, and
Everybody who's unemployed, everybody. It's going to be a disaster. They have to pass something. They have to.
The stay on eviction is also ending.
We don't even have that in Arkansas. We don't have that.
So the number of homeless individuals is going to skyrocket here too, because evictions will no longer be delayed. They go into effect, and so landlords are free to go ahead and evict tenants, and banks are free to go ahead and start foreclosing mortgages. So I mean, they're saying that we're going to witness the greatest number of homeless individuals since the Great Depression. So
It's going to be horrible.
Wonderful news for the day. Sorry, listeners.
Yeah.
We'll try to pick you up with our crazy story, which I think we better take our last break here and get to. So we'll be right back.
I feeling so hollow. Don't you know? Don't you know? I'm living in shadow. Don't you know? Don't you know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? You were fool's gold. Yes, I did.
And we're back with our crazy story of the week. Jonathan Swift, if he were alive today, would be having a field day with the recent comments of Rush Limbaugh. Limbaugh's recent modest proposal is sufficiently inane to place it into our crazy story of the week. Tracy has this for us, so what is Rush suggesting we do?
Have you guys eaten today? Are you hungry? Okay.
We'll find out.
This I found on, or somebody found it. Friendly Atheist. With Limbaugh, we must adapt to COVID like the Donner Party did with cannibalism. Nom nom.
Fire up the smoker.
Fire up the grill.
Yes.
Of all the 2020 headlines that will end up in history books, this one's at least a likely contender. Americans should adapt to the coronavirus like pioneers who turned to cannibalism. That's from right-wing commentator and disgracefully Medal of Freedom recipient Rush Limbaugh, who made that argument on a recent show. This isn't who we are, folks. This cowering and fearful and almost giving up in the face of this enemy, COVID-19. We've not ever done anything like this before. So much of the way we are dealing with this is unprecedented, and it's un-American. That would be more motivational if Limbaugh wasn't defending the Trump administration for leading the way into the abyss. The issue isn't that we're giving up, it's that we can't fight a virus with grit and tenacity. It requires listening to epidemiologists, it requires sacrifice, it requires being prepared with medical equipment. Republicans have refused to do those things at the levels we need to. And then somehow Limbaugh turned to cannibalism, as one does. You've heard of the Donner Party. Maybe some of you haven't. The Donner Party, the Donner family, and a bunch of travelers trying to get to California over the Sierra Nevada mountain range. They made the mistake of trying to make the trip in the middle of winter. We're talking the Lake Tahoe region. They get to the peak. It was so bad that they had to turn to cannibalism to survive. That's what's noteworthy about the Donner Party. If you read the diaries written by the leaders of the Donner Party, the only reference to how cold it was one sentence. It was a particularly tough winter. It's just what was. They didn't complain about it because there was nothing they could do. They had to adapt. This is what's missing. There seems to be no concept of adaptation. There seems to be no understanding in the millennial generation that we can adapt to this and that we're going to have to. So, moral of the story is we should adapt to life-threatening virus, just like a family that resorted to cannibalism. Very inspiring. Twitter users, as usual, did not disappoint in sharing their appreciation for this dose of positive thinking. And it quotes some Twitter folks. I hate to tell Rush Limbaugh this, but if we're endorsing cannibalism, I'm taking that as permission that we can start with him. Anyone want to join me for a big dinner of Limbaugh steaks? So cannibalism is the best plan that we have available to us. First Jones, now Rush. Call me crazy, but I think wearing a mask might be worth a shot before we start looking for wines to pair with sauteed neighbors. The Donner Party got lost because their leader didn't know what he was doing and looking for a shortcut that didn't exist. If that's not an apt comparison, I don't know what is. Also, they failed miserably and had to be rescued. Wear your mask. Unlike the Donner Party, we don't need to resort to eating each other if we have enough common sense to take some basic precautions. And that's that story. What do you guys think? Are we going to eat each other or not?
Yeah.
I'm locking my door tonight.
Right. Where did that come from? I mean,
Oh
I
my
just
gosh,
don't.
man.
Wouldn't eating each other like be the opposite of what we should do right now? I mean, I think that might spread COVID more.
When I think in that where they mentioned it was because of the poor leadership and the lack of direction and the fact that they ended up in this situation, the Donner Party, where they had to do this. Is some analogy to what's going on here, but we've got a lot of other options before we get that far. There are ways of combating this.
I think COVID would spread that way, right? If someone has COVID and you eat them, aren't you going to get COVID?
No, well, not necessarily. I mean,
No.
COVID's not a fecal oral route. It's an aerosol aerobic route transmission.
Yeah.
Really?
But I mean, you could cause aerosols cutting into somebody.
I suppose so.
I hate to even think about this.
Yeah.
And by the way, I want to make sure our listeners are clear on this. It's Donner, Donner, not Daimler. So
Yeah, Jeff,
Donner,
that's a
yeah,
different-
it is Donner.
so don't confuse Jeffrey
Jeffrey.
Dahmer with the Donners here.
They both ate people, though.
Right?
Right. It's like the old joke. Jeffrey Dahmer sitting down to eat lunch at the prison, and he points to a guy's finger and says, "You gonna eat that?"
Oh no! Oh man!
Oh my goodness. Well,
Russ needs to get back on his medication, I think.
Right?
actually, I think he is back
Maybe-
on. Like, that's the problem, man. Rush, get off that OxyContin, man.
Oh man! Hydroxychloroquine.
Oh wow. Well,
Hmm.
this story had to be read to be believed, but there you have it. So, well, gosh, Tracy, thanks so much
right.
for cheering us up after our heavy discussion today. So, that'll wrap us up for this week. If you have enjoyed our program, please pass the word to your friends and associates, believers and non-believers alike. Again, just a reminder that you are welcome to post questions and comments on our Facebook page. Remember, there is a big difference between having good reasons for what one accepts to be true and having bad ones. Incidentally, this is the only distinction one needs to become a strict atheist. This has been Dr. Brad for Tim and Tracy saying so long.
Bye.